And good evening and welcome to the Red Gold and Bold podcast. With us as always, Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network, NFL.com, Eric Eager from Sumer Sports, Sumersports.com. My name is Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB, 810WHB.com, where you can reach my show. Of course, the Red Gold and Bold podcast, proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, proudly serving the greater Kansas City area, OP, Lenexa, Leavenworth, Independence, Lee Summit. You name it, they serve it. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all, and I mean everything, and all things parking lots. A lot to get to today here in this edition of the Red Gold and Bold podcast. Did we learn anything from that Rams game? Like maybe we found their kryptonite? Is it the red zone problems are going to be something teams copy? Skyy Moore was returning punts for some asinine reason. Jeff Chadiha is going to tell us exactly why that was. I cannot wait for that. We've assigned that to him. Ronald Jones is actually on this team. We have proof. We'll get an update on Eager's Pacheco thoughts. Where does he stand now based on some texts and tweets I saw? I don't know that much has changed. Chris Jones, Defensive Player of the Year, maybe. L'Jarius Sneed, even more important, probably not. New additions to the practice squad. Bengals, are they scarier than the Bills? And, of course, we'll get some predictions on that game. Jeff, let's start with you. Did we learn anything? What did you learn from the game against the Rams?
Not a whole lot. You know, it went about the way I think we all thought it would go, which was a blowout. Not much offense from the Rams. Look, we're going to get to Skyy Moore in a second. I think that's important, but I think just for me, it was the kind of game that you get at this point in the year when you're playing an inferior opponent and you're just trying to get through it. And so I don't take too much into the red zone problems. I was intrigued by the way they used Ronald Jones. I thought it was a great opportunity to use him more. We'll get into that as well. I think overall, they just had to get through it. You know, nobody really got banged up. It's Pacheco ran a lot. It was just kind of a weird game to watch. It was one of the worst NFL games I've watched this season, to be honest with you. It was just ugly.
Was it that bad, or is it that bad because the Chiefs have such a high standard that like you sit down to a Chiefs game, you're like, all right, I'm going to see something here, and this was just a grinder?
Well, I think it was. It just shows you. I mean, I'm sitting there watching. I'm thinking the Rams won the freaking Super Bowl last year. Like this is how far they've fallen, and we've talked about this on this show before. It's just I learned more about them and just how dangerous it is to have that kind of strategy when you're going all in one year, and this is how it looks when it doesn't work out. And they are so far from being a good NFL team now, and they're playing a guy I never heard of before in quarterback. And Aaron Donald, I was watching the game thinking, man, he's not even into this game, but turns out he was hurt, had an high ankle sprain, which I guess says more about it. But ultimately, I mean, they're really – the takeaway for me is the Rams are going to stink for a long time now. That's my takeaway.
And they won the Super Bowl at least, though. But I think this really helps, crystallize Chiefs fans why it was so important to do what they did last offseason, right? Which is to take a step back, draft young players, build around Patrick Mahomes, and not do some of the things that the Rams did. Because, would it be a shame if – and it would never get this bad with Mahomes, but, wouldn't it be a shame if that was the outlook for the Chiefs and all they got out of it was one Super Bowl? I think that is the moral of the story. I pushed back a little bit, Jeff, and not because I remember when I was in Lincoln and I was out with a bunch of the students there, and it was Bears Commanders on Thursday night. And they're like, "Oh, you got to get back to your hotel and watch this game." I'm like, "No, this game's gonna suck," and that game sucked. The difference, and last night's game, Colts Steelers, was a prick.
Okay,
that game, the reason the Chiefs Rams game sucked so bad is the Chiefs are good enough to win, and to win by 3 scores, or 2 scores, 16, to win by 2 scores, even though they played like complete crap. That's why the Chiefs game was maybe the worst one, because when two teams get into a pillow fight with each other and the game's close, we somehow think that that's better than like a terrible team facing a great team and the great team winning by 16. But you're right. I think there was like an aspect of the Rams. It's just like, what is there anymore? And it wasn't that. I mean, there was some injuries for sure, but like it's a stars and Jags thing. And when you're 3 stars and it's not even like Ramsey's out there. Donald's mostly out there. I'm trying to think of the other guys. Higbee, but they don't have that many stars. You lose Miller in free agency, and then you lose Kupp and Stafford, and you're screwed, right? But
look at it this way: the Titans, aside from Derrick Henry, didn't have that much more than the Rams had offensively, and they put up a game. And so that's what I'm saying. It's just like, to me, and you're right. I watched the Colts and the Broncos play earlier this year. That was, I think I've just tried to put that out of my memory bank. Yeah. But it was, for all the reasons you just said, it was a rough thing to watch.
Yeah, like the Titans, I think that's their design, though, right? It's weird, but the Titans are designed to win ugly and win with, and like not have great players. The Rams are designed to have great players. So then when they don't have great players, the whole thing goes kaput. And we give Ramsey a little bit of flack for with the Kelsey touchdown. But I know you talked about this on your show, Soren. Like, other than that, Ramsey did a pretty good job on Travis Kelsey. So and so like you see a little glimmers of why, and the interior of the offensive line was, and I know we were without Tooney, but like it had problems at times in that game. And so there are glimpses of what the Rams are good, but without your quarterback, without your number one receiver, it's just the whole thing goes kaput.
I do like this from Brett. It's not all about the bet as much as Eric Eager might have you think, but good teams win, great teams cover.
Well,
and it's not, it isn't like, listen, I on my program picks, I picked the Chiefs. I didn't play him because I also do think there's I think Curtis had the number 32-29 and like 2 or something like that. 32-29 and 3 are 15.5 point underdogs or more over the last 65 games. So there's kind of this, like, you're getting to a number where, one, there's a coaching fraternity and guys call off the dogs and, allow the backdoor covers in because they ain't getting paid on the spread, especially when it's 15.5. They still got a good win at 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And so I wasn't all fired up to bet it, but it is, like Eric always says, the markets. It's what the market says the difference in the two games are. And so when you can play a game like this, and I agree with Jeff, I mean, I did kind of, maybe push back a little bit at you, but the game sucked. I mean, I was keeping myself awake. Yeah. And by the way, I had to do television later. So if anyone wants to say it's because you had 20 Coronas, it wasn't. It wasn't. I had 2, one in the first half, one in the second half. That's it. So it wasn't that I was fading. Not at all. And I was like, oh my, I was at this point, and I'm like, all right, I got to sit up straight.
But by the way, that game, the markets, there was a lot of Chiefs money. Like, that game closed 16.5. If you looked at the closing spread, the Rams covered. That also shows you like how sharp the markets are, right? Because it lands like right on the number sometimes. And you're right, Petro. Like, it's just, with games like those, like, and Mahomes and the Chiefs have not covered at a really, like, somebody always tweets me on the whenever I talk about Mahomes, is like, the Chiefs are something like 15 out of their last 42 games in terms of covering. They don't care about the spread. Like, evidently they, that 2020 season was crazy where they didn't cover a number for like the second half of the year, and with the exception of the Bills game, they didn't cover a spread for like 15 games. And, that is an important thing. And the fact is I think that this team, it's different. Brady, when he was with the Patriots, covered at a 60% clip basically throughout all of time. This Chiefs team is a team that I think in some ways just kind of gets out of these games with wins. And, people make fun of me, and it's a little tongue in cheek, but there are just games where Andy Reid doesn't call the good plays. And like Sunday, other than that, like, reverse thing he tried to run in the red zone, like, he kind of called Isaiah Pacheco, and I'm going to take a mea culpa on Pacheco to an extent. That dude had 20 carries. Like, what are we doing here? Like,
I don't understand how we can talk about this being one of the more boring games, and then Eric is so fired up he just basically like strafed like 4 topics all at once. Like, God forbid we settle down and get into one, whether it's Pacheco or wherever it was. But I think, the fact that you can be a 15.5 point favorite and get the cover does speak to in a sleepwalk game speaks to how strong the team is. And it was, Jeff, we talk about the boring part of it, but it was kind of Patriot-esque, wasn't it? Right? Like this wasn't a divisional game. You could see this being a Jet game or something, but there are a lot of, you go back and look at the Brady's, they're not all 44s, 40 somethings. There's plenty of 20 somethings and plenty of ones that it doesn't really look that impressive. And, was certainly no scoregami or anything that look just like this, right? They just kind of keep adding and maybe they don't, show as much. Like I do want to find out how much coaches can leave stuff on the shelf or quote unquote not call the good plays, as Eric likes to describe it, because it did. I mean, certainly the whole fourth quarter. I looked up, there was 10 plus minutes to go in the game, and Patrick Mahomes had 320 yards passing. He'd have 320 yards passing when the game was over. And I think he had maybe one more pass attempt. So they clearly shelved the entire passing offense. This was businesslike, right? Is that what we learned, that the Chiefs are now good enough that they're not going to maybe spit the bit like they did against the Colts, but they've gotten even better since that time in the season, and maybe they can play their B game, and that's still good enough to win comfortably against second tier or at least third tier or below teams?
Yeah, well, I think the Colts game was a different game. I mean, end of the day, Matt Ryan has been a starting quarterback in the NFL. Pretty much all their starters were out there, right? It's not Turner. Who's the running back? Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah,
everybody played in that game. So they played as hard as they could and got some breaks and won that game. To me, this felt like a dad playing his kid in the driveway, playing pick-up basketball. Just kind of like, okay, I'll let you get a little excitement, but then I'm going to come back, I'm going to dunk on you, I'm going to block your shot. And it was that level. It almost felt like they were just waiting for this thing to get over. So, yeah, I think you're making the right point here, was that it was very businesslike. But I think going into this, the biggest concern the Chiefs probably had was making sure nobody got hurt and they didn't do anything stupid. And so I think they got both things accomplished, which is all you really want in a game where the opponent is this bad.
Yeah. By the way, I love this one. Skyy won the Colts game. Well, Brad, and that's kind of my point. He tried to win this one, and he couldn't. Right. So like that's kind of the point. They did implode the way they did against the Colts game, against the Colts, but they ended up beating a team that I still think Rams are better. They certainly get the clock more than Jeff Saturday. By the way, if you go to Indianapolis, Jeff, if you will drop a grenade in the Indianapolis media's session, because that was the most gutless post-game questioning I've ever heard of an awful. I mean, we'll talk more about that tomorrow on Tootie, but I mean, the clock management, good Lord. But I do think this Rams team is definitively better than that Colts team, even with what they have. The quarterback, the Bryce.
Stafford's playing, you mean?
If Stafford's playing, they're better.
Yeah. But they're definitely better with Stafford. But the defense of the Rams could actually, I mean, they have arguably the best defensive tackle, arguably the best cornerback, and arguably the best middle linebacker. I mean, that's a pretty good place to start on defense. And that's, we talk about the red zone. Let's get into that, because is it a problem, or did they hang 26 points and really shoot themselves in the foot for 15 more against a team that I just said has probably definitely a Hall of Fame defensive lineman, probably a Hall of Fame corner, and I think definitely a Hall of Fame middle linebacker and Bobby Wagner. And Bobby Wagner's still graded very highly by those that grade, who I'm talking about. And they had one touchdown, they being the Chiefs had one touchdown call back when Trey Smith was clearly 3 yards too far down the field. It was the right call, as much as people in my house seem to want to lose their mind. He was 5 yards downfield. They have another one on the throwback, which I don't mind that. I know you get upset at it, but Travis Kelsey was wide open. There wasn't anybody within 10 yards of him. Yeah. You take a compass out and chart it on a map how wide open he was, and not that far from Patrick Mahomes, and he didn't throw it. I mean, it's the kind of play that you wonder, is he trying to bring the Rams cover home? Throw him the ball. He's right there. And he didn't do it. That's 4 more points that they left on the board. And then, of course, the no-look pick where he threw it right to the defensive back. That's 7 more. That's 15 points. So, Jeff, is there a red zone problem? I mean, if they hang 41 in this game, we're not talking about a red zone problem.
I don't know. Yeah, look, I think the interception was the one that I would say I would only take issue with, where he just kind of threw it right to the guy. I don't know what he was looking at, Mahomes, in that situation. I think the Kelsey play was more, he probably wasn't the first read. And so when he came back to him, Because, yeah, right. To be that wide open, 10 yards away, you would think Mahomes would go right to him. But I don't know. I think this team is always going to have like funky stuff happening in the red zone because they're just not a dominant running team. I think you become a better red zone team when you can get to be able to survive in the red zone or thrive in the red zone. You have to get people moving one way or the other. And if you can't get them to come forward, you have to get them doing what the Chiefs do a lot of, which is just misdirection, side to side type stuff. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I'm more surprised that they don't use Juju Smith more in the red zone because he's a big guy and he can make contested catches. They may over scheme it, may overcoach it. You know, they may get too cute with it, but I'd love to just see them throw it up to a guy like a Juju Smith and make it happen. Throw up to Kelsey and see what happens. But yeah, this team has been too prolific offensively to worry about it at this stretch. I think that's just kind of the byproduct of just kind of going through the motions, knowing you're going to win, not being that sharp. I guarantee you against the Bengals, they will be doing everything possible to make it happen in the red zone.
Is there a red zone problem, Eric?
I think it's I mean, to some extent, but it's what Jeff said. They're not only, and they're not a bad red zone team. I think if you look at the numbers, they're just bad relative to where they are the rest of they're number one in expected points added. They're not number one in the red zone, right? So there's a mismatch there. We expect them to be the best offense in football universally, and they're just simply not. I think that the thing that Jeff pointed out, which is great, they're also bad relative to expectations on short yardage plays. They're not like 3rd and 1 in the middle of the field. They're not a great team. 3rd and 2 in the middle of the field. They're not a great team. And again, like they try. I mean, Pacheco had a good start to the game, but he averaged 3.1 yards a carry on Sunday because of a lot of like dud runs in the red zone that didn't go anywhere. And so when you have a running back or running backs who can't score from the stripe, right? That was what Kareem Hunt was so good at. That was what, frankly, Damian Williams was so good at. And they don't have that here. One thing, and this is where I'll come all the way back and say this is the solution. To Jeff's point, I think Juju was feeling out the game on Sunday. He wasn't really a factor. I think coming back from a concussion, it was really kind of they featured Valdez-Scantling more. By the way, where the hell do you want that one MVS? Like, I mean, but also like the other one, the big issue is the running backs don't score on short yardage. And the biggest issue that since the Super Bowl champion year is they don't have a running back that can run the stuff that Damian Williams ran in the playoffs, the little fake, the game-winning touchdown in the Super Bowl. They don't have that. They don't throw those to the backs anymore. Like, what are they doing?
Yeah. Matt brings up a point. Was it just a Joe Tooney thing? He wasn't out there. I mean, I'm sure it didn't help, right, with Aaron Donald out there. I think that's a contributor. And again, 26 points. We're judging it on a Chiefs grading scale where they're the leading scoring team in the NFL. There are a lot of teams that would like to get to 26 points. Ask any Zach Wilson-led team if he'd like to get to 26 points. If
the Broncos have scored 26 points in all their games this year, they'd be undefeated. Like, it's, Yeah.
We're on the running back, so let's stay with that. We'll come back to a couple other things. Ronald Jones, right? I want to save the Pacheco, the latest grading of Isaiah Pacheco from Eric Eager for a minute. But Ronald Jones, I, for one, was happy to see him out there, and I thought he was effective. He even caught a ball down the sideline. I don't understand why they felt the need to just bludgeon away with Pacheco, who is the guy that I think they feel like is the top guy. Maybe not. Maybe that's the idea. Maybe Eric Eager's theory of hammer away with him and save McKinnon and Ronald Jones for the postseason because they're the guys you actually want healthy. Andy Reid's had a real history of running his running backs into the ground and going into playoff games or losing guys in playoff games. Jamal Charles against the Colts, Niall Davis against the Colts. You know, they always seem to be the backup running backs. Jeff,
Sean McCoy was a healthy scratch during the Super Bowl when they won it in 19. Like, the leading rusher for the team was a healthy scratch in the Super Bowl when they won it.
Yeah. So what do you make, Jeff, of Ronald Jones' debut and how the running backs were used in this game?
I wish I would have seen more of him. I'm with you. I thought it was a great opportunity to give him some run, give him some love. You know, Andy, it's kind of weird. It's kind of ironic that for a guy who's a player's coach that you wouldn't take the opportunity to take a guy who's been sitting on your bench all season long and say, you know what, this is a game that we're going to win. Let's get you 10, 11 carries. Let you feel it out. See, run some plays before you get the ball in your hands out of the backfield. And they did sort of become very obsessed with Pacheco down the stretch, and he got cracked a couple times.
Yes.
Where I was just like, dang, man, you could give a guy a little break. But ultimately, what I saw from Ronald Jones didn't really impress me when he had the ball in his hands. And again, that kind of runner, you probably need 10 to 15 carries to see what he can do. Maybe 4 isn't a great way to evaluate him. He looks slow to me. You know, he didn't look that spry. Didn't look that powerful. I mean, when Pacheco runs, whatever you think of the guy, he makes an impression on you. And Ronald Jones didn't make that kind of impression on me. I just thought he looked like a guy who I could see why he didn't win the job or win that role that Pacheco got coming out of preseason.
Yeah, I can see it as well. I also think there's just like one of two things. Why are you, if Pacheco's your guy, why are you letting him take this beating? Because it was clear that the Rams were making a point. Okay, you think you're going to run it in? Well, we know we're not winning this game, but we're going to win the quarter pain now. And they were delivering pops everywhere. Eric, what did you think about the running back usage?
It was very strange. Like when I was trying to fish out information about Ronald Jones in the preseason, I messaged somebody. I said, look, what is the deal with Ronald Jones? He's getting cut, right? And they're like, no, I wouldn't assume that. I think, Brett Veach, I can't remember if Brett, the word that Brett Veach was like, Ronald Jones was like running back 1 for him in that draft when he was coming out. Like, it's very like, he goes after the guys that he graded well. I think that there's a big opinion of him in the room, but I also think, and Todd Lebo talked about this when I was on your show last week. There's also, I believe there's some incentive, like likely to be earned incentives and stuff, money stuff, where I think that they're trying to split the difference a little bit. But the Pacheco stuff at the end of the game made little sense to me. I know you don't want to go with McKinnon, and I know Ronald Jones, maybe to Jeff's point, maybe he's just not in shape, and the 3 carries and 1 catch was enough for him to like look slow and like he needed to get his legs under him. I wish that wasn't the case, but when you watch Pacheco run, it's just like it's hard because he doesn't look like a natural running back, right? He looks like a really good athlete who gets he looks like Antonio Gibson, right? And for all the good reasons and the bad reasons, a guy who's a great athlete out of Memphis playing wide receiver and can be effective. He had a 1,000-yard year last year, but when it comes, like, if the thing's broken down, if Joe Tooney's not starting at guard or the other team knows you're going to run, like when they've given Pacheco the ball this year, they've lost 12 expected points, right? And that's like if you think about that, it's like third of a win or so, right? Last week, it was
explain that. Explain that because, he was averaging 7 yards a carry the other day. Like, is this against your theory that throw it on every down, right? Is that like versus how is he losing expected points when yards per carry, he's one of the best backs in the NFL that day?
Well, so because it goes in different ways. Like, so like a 9-yard run on 1st and 10 is an impressive run, but if you follow that up with a 0-yard run on 1st and 10, the next time he gets the ball, that's a 4.5-yard average. But the 9-yard run is not nearly as good as the 0-yard run is bad, if that makes sense, using the math model. So
but that's a math model created by people, right?
Sure,
that was not handed down high on the mountains from football gods who said this is how you grade it.
Well, but I mean, the models are created by basically saying these types of runs have resulted in the history of the NFL in this many points being scored on this drive.
But they don't include. What they don't include is, like, when you say, well, it's a 4-yard run on 1st and 10, and so you could have thrown it for 7 yards, therefore it's a negative.
But it's not even that. It's literally.
But that model. This is why I bristle at this stuff, and not to you and I to butt heads again on numbers. But what I don't like is that is based upon a vacuum, right? Not the real play sheet. That's based upon there are an infinite number of better plays that could have been run, and they're not. There are not 400 great passing plays in every game, and that you shun them all for the run. Part of the reason why you run is to just get a little something so you don't have to burn off all the good plays. And so that's why I think it's I think it's erroneous to say, well, they've lost. What'd you say? How much had they lost with him?
12 expected points on his carries, or on his carries and receptions this year.
Yeah, like because he runs and carries it. Like they were going to score on a game, they score 40 points. They were going to score 52, but he cost them 12 points. I call bullshit.
Well, no, that's over. So they played 11 games, right? So it's 1 point a game. They lose by giving them the ball.
And I still, I still object. Then I'll soften it too. I object because there are not enough. It's like I always talk about, like the go for it on fourth down and go for two. Everybody loves that, except for nobody realizes you look over if you're Brandon Staley and there's Joe Lombardi or John Lombardi or whichever Lombardi's over there, and he's looking at his play sheet going like he doesn't have anything. So why are you making
none of these are addressing we'll talk about expected points at some point on this show. None of those are what goes into expected points model. I'm just saying that, like, essentially, and I said this, I give this when I give lectures. Like, the issue is that when you judge things by yards, not every yard is created equally, right? So a 3-yard run on 3rd and 2 is worth positive expected points. A 3-yard run on 3rd and 5 is worth negative expected points because you got to punt, and that's all that it's doing. And so the issue that I have with, again, and Pacheco has done well, better than I thought. Like, everybody in the comments, go fly a kite. He's doing well. When the information changes, I change my mind. But at the same time, the fact of the matter is if you have a guy, let's say he gets 15 yards on 5 carries, it matters how those are distributed. It matters if it goes 5-5-5, because that's basically 3 positive gains, or 15 and then 0-0, right? That matters, and that's what you're trying to get at when you go, like, yards per carry is super. I talked about 3.1. But also having the context of, like, how those yards are distributed matters too. And I think the issue right now with the Chiefs run game, which is better than what it was before, right? Because before it was 2 yards every freaking time. Now it's a 10-yarder and then 5 2-yarders, right? That's better. It's still not that great.
Right. I just don't get why we go through the explanation of a 4-yard run on 1st and 10 versus 3rd and 3, and how the 4 yards are different, but we don't.
Because for the history of football, they've all been added together the same. When you say that Barry Sanders ran for 1,850 yards in 1994, we did not ask when were those yards accumulated. We just say
those who fear the finish of the sentence fear the point. I will say that. I'll give up on it because you and I will go for days on this. A 4-yard run when you have no pass play is better, right? When you don't have an idea, period. That's where
I reject the notion that Andrew Dale Reed doesn't have a pass play on any given play.
Maybe
Joe Lombardi doesn't have a pass play. I will grant you that.
The red zone performance of the Chiefs might beg to differ this past week. Jeff, let's talk a little bit. First of all, so Pacheco's better, right? Just before we move off that, you're now starting to buy into him having value. Is that correct? Is that what that was all about?
No, he's better. He's the best running back on the team, which I'll say that. Now,
that's a backhanded compliment there ever was one, huh?
Yeah.
Well, there was the quote from The Office is that was a compliment to you, Phyllis, as well as a slight to Andy.
Yeah. Okay. Jalen Ramsey on Travis Kelsey. He got burnt for the big touchdown, but there were other times it was pretty effective. And this is not, they did not split an atom, because old school Chiefs fans will remember the Denver Broncos putting Champ Bailey on Tony Gonzalez and saying, we're not getting beat, but the best receiver on the field may be 255 pounds, but he's going to get our best coverage guy. We saw that from the Rams. Not everybody has a Jalen Ramsey, so this is not a get out of jail free card for every defense that's out there. But it did seem to take him out of the end zone, other than one play where Ramsey, I think, thought he was baiting Patrick Mahomes into a throw, and Mahomes kind of then threw it behind him, which almost wrapped, or it was a brilliant throw. I'll be happy with either way you want to put it, which not only wrapped, turned Ramsey around, but also sent Kelsey in the right direction for the goal line. I think it was an effective defense, Jeff. Did you think it was effective, and do you think there are teams out there that can use it to their advantage?
Well, it's effective because you're talking about probably the best corner in the game who's executing it. So, yeah, he did hold Kelsey to 4 catches for 57 yards. looked bad on that one touchdown, but that was a great route and a great connection with Mahomes. So you can't really, nobody's stopping that from happening. I just don't think you can do that with it. Not every team has a Jalen Ramsey or a Derwin James. We've seen other teams do this. I've seen Tre'Davious White cover Kelsey. I've seen James Bradbury do it last year with the Giants. He had success doing it. It's, obviously it's very hard to deal with him because, and the broadcasters talked about this, they have a rapport, Mahomes and Kelsey, that's very hard to defend just because they're out there pretty much like improvising on every play. And so you can't really, if you're a defensive back trying to figure out how to cover this stuff, they're not running routes. You can't just look at a guy and say, okay, he's running a dig or he's running a comeback or he's running a post. It's like, it could be anything. And so they clear out for him. They give him a lot of space to work underneath. And I think we all know that the teams that really have success defending him are the teams that beat him up. And so, I don't think you're ever going to have one guy who's going to have an entire game stopping him. You're going to have to beat him up on the line of scrimmage. You're going to have what the Patriots have done, defensive ends chucking him all the time. And you're going to have to get Mahomes to a place where he's not willing to be patient and letting Kelsey get open. Like, to me, that's more the key of it. Not just Kelsey's route running, but that Mahomes can sit there and wait for it to happen and kind of read it. And so somehow you have to disrupt. You have to get Mahomes looking elsewhere or get him worried about the pass rush to stop Kelsey from doing what he's doing. I don't think anybody out there is going to stop him one-on-one.
And it wasn't just Jalen Ramsey on him, Eric, but if we take out that 39-yard touchdown catch, to Jeff's point about the 4 for 57, it becomes 3 for 18. It becomes 7 targets, 3 catches, 18 yards. Without the touchdown, you can't take it out, and that's why the Chiefs are great, because Mahomes to Kelsey, even if you do a really good job all day, they beat you once, and it's a really big play. I get all that. I'm not trying to diminish it, but if Mahomes is off on that throw, which he's human, and he'll miss a throw from time to time, and you look at the stats and you go, it's 8 targets, 3 catches, 18 yards, no touchdowns. We're talking about how here's the new game plan. Yeah. Like, how concerned – should Andy Reid be about this being employed more?
I think he should be, but I think he knows when it, like, we're a week removed from the Chargers putting one of the best safeties. I know he gets hurt all the time, but one of the best safeties in all of football on Kelsey, not the whole game, but like notoriously on Kelsey the whole time. And that was when the Chiefs were running out Skyy Moore, Justin Watson, Marquez Valdes-Scantling as the 3 wideouts. And Kelsey was 6 for 130 and 3 touchdowns. I think a lot of it has to do with, look, like, they made a concerted effort to get Marquez Valdes-Scantling the ball on Sunday. And, if I think his stat line looks a lot better if he hangs on to that one where he was held. But he was like 4 for 56, which is a good stat line for him. And like, I think they were kind of like, look, we're not going to scheme stuff specifically for Kelsey because we want to move the ball around. We want to see what Skyy Moore has. We want to see what Justin Watson has. The Fortson and Gray had targets as well. And then the MBS stuff, like, he made 2 down the field plays again, which is, again, we talk about him disappearing in some games. I think in games like against the Rams, and we're going to see a few of these games again, like the Raiders and the Broncos twice. I don't think we're going to see one of these game plans against the Bengals, a team that beat them twice last year in January. But I think in the games where they run a vanilla scheme, you can shut down Travis Kelsey because, it's just – but I think when Andy Reid – makes up his mind to throw the ball to Travis Kelsey, to what Jeff's point is, it's like Michael Jordan on a mid-range. It's like, you don't have to run a play for him, right? You just run your offense and, you run the scheme and let him deviate from that a little bit.
Yeah. How about Skyy Moore? Let's get to the elephant in the room. I have no problem with Skyy Moore. Like Mark Boerichter, former Chiefs wide receiver, said on our pregame show on 810, he said, listen, if guys aren't doing their job, there are 2 reasons why. Either they won't or they can't. If they won't, it's a coach's job to get them to do that. If they can't, it's a coach's job, or I'll say a front office's job, to get somebody who can. But if they can't, they shouldn't be asked to do that job. Skyy Moore can't field punts. And this seems to me, I'll go so far as to say, and what I said on Monday was, they've given up 3 weeks ago against the Jaguars an onside kick. Last week, they gave up a fake punt. I think because they're hell-bent on proving the rest of the football world and certainly the media in Kansas City or the fans or somebody wrong about they're going to get a kick return. And I think you get beat on onside kicks when you're not telling guys, stay up there. You're telling them, get back and get our return going. You get beat on fake punts when you're like, listen, your job, McDuffie, is to keep him off the returner. Don't let him set the edge. Get him off there. And you're forgetting the principal part of let's get the football first. Right? That's the most important part. It seems like they are hell-bent on proving that they can send anybody back there to return kicks or punts. And it's like just arrogance has led to something that against the Bengals will get them beat, Jeff.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt. And whenever we have the conversation about Bill Belichick versus Andy Reid, as far as who's the best coach in the NFL, this is where the separation comes in my mind. Because there's no way in hell Skyy Moore gets 3 chances to field a punt if he's already dropped 2.
Although Thursday, the Patriots gave up a kickoff return to the Vikings, a running into the kicker penalty to extend the game-winning drive. That was pretty funny, but yeah, in general, that makes sense.
Yeah, you're not putting a guy out there who's never done it before. And I was on the radio show with the morning guys on Soren's radio station, 810 this morning. This is a coaching problem. It's not a Skyy Moore problem. I'm with you. I have no issue with Skyy Moore as a player. I think he's going to grow and develop. I like his talent, his skill set. I think the 2 problems I have with it. One, the kid obviously has a confidence issue now. And so you're putting a guy out there and asking him to do something he's not comfortable doing, and he's failing at it. And you come back, you're talking about, well, I'm proud of him for the way he handled it. And, I think he's going to grow from this and blah, blah, blah. At the end of the day, it's like he's supposed to be a receiver. You brought him here to be a receiver, not a punt returner. Turn him into a receiver. The more that stuff happens to him, the more it can affect how he plays as a receiver. And 2, find somebody else to field the football. It's like it's not like he's Tyreek Hill out there when he catches the ball and he's going 75 yards with it. The guy gets like 5 yards on a return. That's not worth the gamble of him possibly dropping it. And that comes back to valuing possessions. And sometimes Andy will get in this place where it's like, whatever. I love this kid. I want to see what he does. Stop it. Just let somebody else catch the ball. Get your quarterback out there with your top offense and make it happen.
And there's a little bit of the Jeff Saturday approach of acting like there's nothing to see here while the fireworks factory is blowing up behind you. In his press conference, Dave Tobe has come out, 2 of the last 3 weeks. One time it was like, is there a wall? Is it a firing squad? Because they had a horrible week. Last week he comes out after a horrible week and goes, I want to start with, remember we won the game. Right? Like, he's tried to diffuse.
You didn't win the game.
He absolutely, his unit did not. They won in spite of his unit. And he's been the best special teams coach in the history of the game. So I'm not trying to run down like he's a boob or something. And I'm open to the idea that it's all Andy Reid saying, no, we're pedal to the metal. And like Jeff said, instead of winning ugly, he wants to play with style. And kick returns are fun and all that. And he's just not willing to do the grind of the things. I'm totally up to it. But I think on Thursday, when the coordinators come out, Dave Tobe is going to get hit. I mean, there's usually it's a pretty quick session with him because how many special teams questions do you have? He's got a lot that he's got to answer for in this one, and jokes aren't going to get it done. I do find this one interesting from Brett. I don't know what his pants have to do with anything, but, whatever
Soren dog walking somebody for misspelling something in a social media post.
Yeah.
It's so good.
I just love it for people on the podcast. If you catch us on the pod, we stream live on Tuesday nights at 9 p.m. Central, and you can have part of the comments.
Can we talk though?
Right. Hey, let me at least finish. Let me get the comment out
this guy in Nordstrom. Yeah.
Brett's comment was Skyy Moore returning pants is insanity at this point, and I agree. Keep the pants you've got, kid. It's fine. Returning punts, that is certainly insanity for sure. Now, go ahead. Can we what, Eric?
Well, this is the best part of this Chiefs season as a fan of this team and an analyst of this team, who's very close and I love the fact that this team has turned the page on almost everything this year, right? They turned the page on going all in. They turned the page on certain players. Like they've grown up as a team, and yet they're still trying to win games on special teams. Like Alex freaking Smith is their quarterback, and that is the thing that pisses me off when like I had this conversation last year. I wrote an article at PFF. If you want to give them a click, I wrote like why they should change the kickoff rule. And last season, the Chiefs were the worst team in terms of taking the ball out. We're not even talking about this stuff. Taking the ball out of the end zone and like ditching yards by taking. If you don't watch the NFL now, it's very clear you should kick the ball short and cover, and you should never ever freaking take the ball out of the end zone. Those are two proverbs, and the Chiefs royally screw that up. And I messaged somebody on the team and I'm like, what are you guys doing? Like, and I'm like, you have the best player in the league playing quarterback for you. When Alex Smith was playing quarterback for, yes, you wanted to steal a touchdown. The 2016 year, the first AFC West title, that was an 8-8 team that finished 12-4. And that was because they had Tyreek Hill, they had Eric Berry. They stole touchdowns all year. You don't have to steal touchdowns with this team. Like the whole thing about the Skyy Moore thing that pisses me off is what's the benefit? Like there's no benefit. Like you're not the only thing is a drawback. If you run a punt back against the Rams, congratulations, you win 30-10. Who gives a like? And if you take the ball out, I mean, Byron Pringle fumbled the ball against the Bills, right? Like, cost them a possession, cost them the 1 seed last year, right? Like when your quarterback is the best player in all of football, you should fair catch every punt, like literally put Dan Sorensen back there and fair catch the ball. You should knee every kickoff. You should kick every ball through the end zone. Now that's a little bit different than what I just said, but literally shrink the variance in the game and go for the expected outcome. Because newsflash, if the expected outcome happens in every game because you're favored, you're going to win all your games. So why are you messing that up? And basically the response I got was Dave Toub wants to feel important. And I get that. I understand that. But it's going to cost this team a game, and it might cost this team a Super Bowl.
Yeah, we had it earlier, Jeff, that like there are 11 rookies that were active in that game against the Rams for the Kansas City Chiefs. 10 of them got into the game. The alleged offensive tackle from Kentucky was the only one that didn't get into the game. But that's a lot of young players. Like, why are you stop acting like you've got all these veterans? But I mean, it comes down to Andy Reid, doesn't it? Right? Like when Dave Toub goes, okay, we're going big return, right? You go, no. Watson goes back and fair catches it. I mean, stop, Dave. Enough's enough. Like, I don't like doing this, but I said it last week and I'm there. Like, do it again, and it's time to start talking about making a change in season with the coaching staff. Like, I really think we're at that point. And if this team were 4-7, what would we be saying about the special teams right now?
Yeah,
and blow it all up, right, Jeff?
Yeah. No, that's a fair point. And let's not forget, I'm a Dave Toub fan, but let's not forget the Green Bay Packers were the top seed in the playoffs in the NFC last year and lost a playoff game because of special teams play. Like it's a big deal. And I think sometimes it's very easy use the word arrogance, and I do think that's part of it when it comes to how Andy views this stuff, where it's, hey, we got Patrick, we've got this offense, we've got Kelsey, we've had this run. What could go wrong? And I think you never want to be in that place where you just feel like possessions don't matter, mistakes aren't going to kill you, you can overcome stuff. It's where the Bills are struggling right now, right? I mean, they have all this talent, but they're one of the worst teams in the league when it comes to turning the ball over. And that's what kills you in the playoffs. The reason the Bengals got to the Super Bowl last year wasn't just because Joe Burrow is a great story and Jamar Chase. They got 7 turnovers in the postseason.
And their kicker hit every kick in the playoffs.
That stuff matters.
The Chiefs were only in that barn burner with the Bills because Harrison Butker missed a PAT and a field goal. Otherwise, in that game, like way earlier than all the 13-second stuff.
Yeah, no doubt. Chris Jones, Defensive Player of the Year. Is it time to start talking about that, Jeff? I mean, he's #1 graded interior defender. He's sacking quarterbacks. He's beating double teams. He is a menace. Where do you stand on Chris Jones?
He should be in the conversation. Look, and he's not, for one, he doesn't play a sexy position, or he plays a position where the sexiness goes to Aaron Donald and everybody else is kind of secondary. But unfortunately, Micah Parsons is a dominant force playing on a team that's always playing big spotlight games. He's going to get it. But yeah, Chris Jones is probably playing the best football of his life right now. And he is, you take him off that pass rush, and I don't know what you have as far as getting after the quarterback. I mean, he is playing playing very high level. And I do think he'll get some votes. He'll get people who watch the games and watch football will see it. But unfortunately, we live in a world where just as the MVP race is about quarterback, defensive player of the year has now become about sacks, about edge rushers. It's not really about,
And I like what Jeff said too about, he doesn't play a sexy position or a position that's only sexy with Aaron Donald. Aaron Donald plays it like Barry Sanders, right? He's the Barry Sanders, the defensive lineman. Chris Jones is your traditional, I don't want to say Reggie White because no one's Reggie White. He's the best I've ever seen, but he's more your traditional, dominating defensive tackle. He's in there. He pushes guys back. He splits double teams. He uses swim moves. He's tall. He's big. It's not this explosive darting all over the place kind of guy like Aaron Donald is, almost looking like, Floyd Mayweather or something in there when he's, hand-to-hand combat with guys. But Eric, is anybody more effective than Chris Jones right now? I mean, I get the Micah Parsons part, and I'm fine with that. He was hurt. Let's see if he plays all the games. Let's see how the Cowboys finish. But I think Chris Jones does lose style points a lot of the time.
Well, I'm going to give away a free bet to all the people in Kansas. By the way, if you're a sports book that wants to sponsor this podcast, please get after us. Chris Jones for Defensive Player of the Year next year is probably a better bet. I went through and looked at, because I was making a case for Rashawn Gary of Jeff's Michigan Wolverines. Usually when you look at Defensive Player of the Year, that player actually has a better season the year before they win the award. So Gilmore was much better in 18 than he was 19 last season. Well, Donald's a weird one, but all the players that end up winning that award are usually TJ Watt was better in 19 than he was 20. And so it goes down the list a little bit. Micah Parsons, in many ways, because of the injury, will have been more effective last year than this year, and will win the award because we come into the year ready for him to win the award. I think if Chris Jones finishes the year with 15, I think of Chris Jones is a lot like John Randall, very strong, can play inside, outside. They tried, the Vikings when I was a kid tried Randall at end. He was nowhere close to as effective as he was as an interior guy. But when you'd swing out and play end in a pinch, he'd be great. The same way that Jones has been this year. But there is a little of that Reggie White to him, Soren, where he lines up over the tackle. And JJ Watt did this at the very end of his Houston tenure, where he lined up over the tackle, not because he can go around the guy but just because he can put his hand in the guy's chest and push him backwards 5 yards. And that, to Jeff's question, I think the defensive line has played really well this year because Chris Jones has given them the opportunity. I think if you take Jones off of that defensive line, I think you have a defensive line that's going to struggle. Frank Clark is playing as well as he's ever played with the Chiefs. And I think a lot of that is that there's an inspiration for Chris Jones, a leadership there that's been lacking over the past few years. And I think that it's trickled down. And also guys like Karlaftis and guys like Dunlap are getting late pressure that was not afforded them last year because Chris Jones is more effective at kicking the quarterback into their area. And so, yeah, I think Jones is a candidate. I think next year, though, if he plays this way next year, he's going to win the award because, we get ready to prime the pump in this awards market. It's almost always you're paying the guy for the year before.
Red, Gold, and Bold is brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, serving the entire metro area. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call and tell them you heard here on Red, Gold, and Bold, 816-484-3338. If your business of any kind has any kind of parking question, whether it's just a little bitty problem or it's an entirely brand new parking lot, they handle it all at Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Call 816-484-3338. Tell them you heard about them here on Red, Gold, and Bold. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. Talking about the pass rush, I will bring up L'Jarius Sneed. The PFF grades for what they're worth, their grades are getting even better. L'Jarius Sneed, number 2 corner. according to those grades. You know, the longer you put the quicker you get after the quarterback, the less time you got to cover. And we just hearing Eric, Jeff talk about, Dunlop and Karlaftis getting kind of those secondary move sacks, right? The effort sacks. That's a product of somebody being covered. L'Jarius Sneed. Is it time for L'Jarius Sneed to get a lot more credit nationally, and not just as they love to call him as a Swiss Army knife, and he is. It's amazing how they don't seem to see him coming in the pass rush. Whether he gets there's a sack, he also anticipated really well and got a batted pass in this game. That was a really big play because the receiver was open. The quarterback Perkins wisely threw to where the rush, the blitz was coming from, and his guy was there, but Sneed knocked it down. Is it time for L'Jarius Sneed to be getting a lot more credit? Not only for how this defense is progressing in the right direction, but just nationally as a big-time defensive playmaker.
I like him a lot. I like what he does. He feels more like a safety who they put at corner to give them options elsewhere. But I think he's going to have, if he wants that kind of recognition, this is the week when you get it. It's when you got Jamar Chase across from you. It's when you got Stephon Diggs across from you. It's when you have Justin Jefferson across from you. The one knock I have on the guy is that when they're playing those kinds of receivers, either he's not covering them or those receivers are going crazy against somebody else. And so to be that kind of player, like he's got to be taking those kind of assignments. And that's the only thing I'll say, because I think the blitzing element, he's physical, he tackles. He definitely is got a nose for the football. But I just feel like when they're playing those kind of teams that have big-time receivers like Devontae Adams, he's not – he doesn't show up for those games.
When's the last time I'm trying to think of like when the last time a tight end really hurt the Chiefs, because I think that's kind of where he's at. The middle of the field has been really good this year, right? And I tweeted this out yesterday, and frankly, like I want some backup from my friends here. I think he's the Tyrann Mathieu of this defense now, right? And
that's what I think he is. Yeah,
and everybody's like, oh, he tackles and Tyrann didn't tackle. Like, did we forget 2009? The guy was the MVP of the team, voted on by his teammates. Like, I think he's that, like to Jeff's point, I think like Antoine Winfield type player, right? Where like he's in that box and you don't need a third linebacker against good running teams. He's in that box and the tight end is erased if it's a great tight end. If you're playing a team like the Titans and you have to play 4-3 base, he can play outside corner and shut down Treylon Burks. But the one thing that is missing, and I wonder, and I know Sam was talking about this on your show, Soren, like he wants to play outside corner. Like the thing that is missing is locking up an outside receiver for the whole game. But is that skill set, does that even exist in the league? I mean, Sauce Gardner looks like he's that guy, but like that skill set doesn't exist in the league. I don't think in great supply. I mean, Charvarius Ward has had a great year for the Niners and by all accounts had a pretty good career for the Chiefs. And he was abused by Jamar Chase last year. And like, I just think like that being like a benchmark from which we evaluate corners is maybe a little bit too harsh.
Yeah, but that's awesome. But go ahead, Soren.
Well, no, I was going to ask you, Jeff, because I mean, you played the position. Like, I think you're right. I do think he is. Somebody said, well, he's a safety his first. He's actually a safety at the end at Louisiana Tech, which is what a lot of people thought brought his grade down because they're like, well, wait a minute, why didn't you leave him at the more valuable position corner? And then he didn't grade as well at safety. And I think he's this kind of new age hybrid guy that just deep patrol center field. No, that's not his thing. He hasn't, quote unquote, traveled with the receiver, but they did do that in the second half with Mike Williams. When Mike Williams was eating them up against the Chargers, they finally started doing it. That's not what Spagnuolo wants. Like, I think, like to Eric's point, if we're to sit here and say, well, if Sneed wants to be recognized this way, this is what he's got to do. Well, it's not up to him, right? It's up to Steve Spagnuolo, and that's not how Spagnuolo likes to put his corners where they are to disguise the blitz. And that's been effective for his team. I think every coach would like to have great corners that I don't have to move them around so you can identify the defense. You never know what I got because right's on right, left's on left. We know that's how Bob Sutton was as well. He didn't want to move anybody. I think the question is, have we seen enough of Sneed to believe that his coverage skills are good enough that if you need to, and they felt like they did against the Chargers and he was effective in doing it, that he could be that guy if asked to be that guy, Jeff?
He could, but again, I think you have to do it consistently. And the point I was going to make is that that's how corners in this league separate themselves and start to become get the notoriety that we're talking about. He might someday get is that you gotta take people away. That's why Sauce Gardner is such a hot name right now because he takes it away. That's why Trayvon Diggs became such a big name last year because he was taking people away and taking the ball away. It's picks and it's shutting people down.
But that
I know that's there's more nuance to it than that, but I think that's how it works.
But that's a hard way to play defense, right, Jeff? Like,
oh, it is.
Like the more strong links you create on your football team, the more difficulties there are, right? Like Derwin James. I always say the reason the Chargers suck is that they put too much pressure on Derwin James, and then when he gets injured, they're screwed. Like the reason the Niners have losing seasons all the time, even though they have some genius at head coach, is they put too much on Kittle's plate, and then when he gets hurt, you're not doing that stuff with Ross Dwelly, right? So in my opinion, I think what's cool about the Chiefs is you're also seeing some Trent McDuffie in the slot on some downs. You're seeing the Super Bowl season when Matthew went down and played the slot in nickel, and Kendall Fuller was the free safety, even though they traded for Kendall Fuller to be their inside outside guy. That versatility, when they lost Thornhill in the playoffs, they didn't have the faith in Daniel Sorensen to be that deep guy. They're putting some, and the fact that, and again, I'm not here to stand for Matthew. He's obviously got his issues, but the fact that Matthew could play in the deep half of the field, but also play the nickel, was hugely valuable for that team, because when your star players can do a number of different things at once, then you don't need to put average to below average players in positions that they're not good at. When your great players can do all the things pretty well, then your average players can do the one thing they're good at. And that, to me, that's where Sneed is, right? If it's a game where that the slot receiver is a shiftier guy, then put McDuffie out there and have him play outside. When the inside guy is more like a Mike Williams or a tight end, then put him inside. And it gives the Chiefs I fear that, if you're trying to get him a contract extension and justify it, just have him play on the outside like Sauce Gardner, that might weaken the defense in ways that having him play everywhere else would not.
We'll see how they finish up. There, statistically speaking, after the Bengals, they get some teams that are not as strong offensively. They should have a chance to pad collectively the team defensive stats coming down the stretch. Jeff, do you make anything of the practice squad additions? Melvin Gordon, running back; Brandon Williams, D tackle; Brian Edwards, wideout. All three veterans. Certainly depth, or is there one that you say, okay, this guy can make a difference before the end of the year?
I think they're kicking the tires. I would imagine if I'm picking somebody, the receiver, Edwards, probably has the best opportunity. I can't imagine them being comfortable handing the football to Melvin Gordon after the year he's had. I thought he was done as a football player. It's the easiest way to end your career as a running back is to start dropping the ball consistently. And he did that in Denver. It was a disaster. I don't know what got into him. Maybe it's like the baseball version of the yips or whatever, but I just don't see him being a factor. I've liked Brian Edwards in the past. He's a big receiver, and he seems to be reliable as a pass catcher. I don't know why he hasn't stuck in other places, but I thought he was solid with the Raiders, and I think he's got the best opportunity.
Eric?
Yeah, I actually got a message. I asked somebody about this in the league today, and they were like, at this time of year, the practice squad is about giving your offense a look and your defense a look more than it is developing players, right? And we talk about developing players. And so, I think getting veterans in here is about giving them looks, right? And about giving the Chiefs veteran presence, on a team that's younger, right? 1 to 53. For my money, they haven't put Danny Shelton in the game, that much. Maybe there's something wrong there. Mike, Colin Saunders has played wonderfully this year. Derek Nottie is not. Derek Nottie is the lowest graded player on the defense, and PFF grades and run defense, I think, are pretty good. And so he's been bad, and he started every game so far. I think there might be a situation where they transition more towards leaning on Saunders, but Saunders has never really played full games, and having Williams be kind of an early down team, especially when you look at the teams that might be in the playoffs in the AFC. You're going to need. I mean, if they face the Titans again, they're going to need somebody to hold the point of attack in that game.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of with Jeff that it's to kick the tires. I like that point about the scout team that maybe some of this is just about getting him prepped there. If anyone's going to, I would assume Brandon Williams. I kind of like the comparison to Mike Pinnell. And because there's a spot where a guy's not playing well, Derek Notty's not playing well, and I think that's a distinct possibility. All right, we're at it. Chiefs at Bengals. Jeff, what are you feeling like? What are the keys to this game for the Chiefs to get a win?
I think two things. I think two things. Watching the last two games that these teams have played against each other, the Chiefs have to figure out a way to decipher Lou Anaruma's the defensive coordinator for the Bengals. He is a very underrated assistant coach in this league, and he has found a way to mystify Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes in the second half of two games that have led to Bengals victories. And last year in the AFC Championship game, he did it just by rushing three guys and dropping 8 and daring the Chiefs to run. And he has a great feel for the psychology of coaches and players that I think goes a long way towards coaching defensive football. He just has a great feel for it. And so they have to be ready for his curveballs. And then the flip side of it, I mean, they got to deal with Jamar Chase. Yeah, I've said this all year long. It's a consistent theme with this defense, as long as actually since Mahomes has been here, they face great receivers. They get a lot of problems thrown their way. And so they got to find a way, whether it's L'Jarius Sneed or Trent McDuffie or somebody, to keep him under control, because if he gets loose, it's going to be a long day.
Yeah. Eric, what are you thinking?
Man, this Bengals team is better than last year's team. I think in a lot of ways, I think Zach Taylor has figured it out a little bit as far as getting Burrow into shotgun. They've been without Mixon for a couple of games, and Samaje Perine's been fine. T. Higgins is a bona fide superstar. Like, he's a number one receiver on every team in the league but the Bengals. Chase comes back, obviously. When you look at the markets, this thing opened 3, and I would be surprised if it didn't close around a pick 'em. It's about 2 right now. A lot of sharp money on the Bengals so far this week. I will be at the game, so if any of our Red, Gold, and Bold,
I'll be there too.
Okay, so Jeff, we're hanging out. We're hanging out this weekend. If anybody wants to stop by and say hi, shoot me a DM on Twitter or something like that. Obviously, thanks for supporting the show. This is where I pull back and be a homer a little bit. I think Andy Reid does everything possible to win this football game. There's more signal in being up by multiple scores twice in the first half than there is about getting caught from behind. And so I think that the Chiefs win this game. I don't think it's by much. I think touchdown, field goal, but I think the Chiefs win.
I like this one. Stop going to Chiefs-Bengals games, Eric. Maybe that's the key. Get you out of the stadium.
I can't. Come on, man.
Come on. Give us a little. Listen, I'm going to take the Chiefs big. I usually come in at some kind of like 33-20 type of score, and I'm feeling that here. I think maybe it gets a little bit higher. I think the Chiefs come in. I think they left a lot on the shelf. There's going to be a lot of stuff that they fire at the Bengals. It's boring, just picking everything around the spread and by 1 or 2 points, in my opinion. I do think that this is circled on Patrick Mahomes' calendar, and I think it's circled on Andy Reid's calendar. But I think they recognize if they put the Bengals down, they can eliminate the Bengals. I know we didn't get a chance to talk about it. Maybe we'll talk more about it tomorrow on our 2D podcast. If you're an NFL fan, we talk NFL on our 2D podcast Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. Central. But I think you look at it and look at how difficult that Bengals schedule is. And if you're the Chiefs, you have a chance to maybe choke them out right here, because they've got a lot of really difficult games. The Bengals schedule, and I don't think people realize it, it's already been tough. But here, moving on, by the way, this is a week of games. I heard you talking about this morning, Jeff. Chiefs are at Cincy. These are the AFC contenders games this week. Dolphins are at the Niners. Titans are at the Eagles. Ravens have Denver. That's the one that's got the gimme. Bills are at the Patriots. Bengals are at the Chiefs, obviously. And the Jets are at the Vikings. Pats, as I mentioned, are at the Bills. Chargers are at the Raiders. It's at least a divisional game. That's a pretty good slate of games. Yeah. Real quick, the Bengals remaining games: Chiefs at home, Browns at home, at the Bucks, at the Patriots, Bills at home, Ravens at home. The only team they play, now they got 4 out of 6 at home, but the only team they play that doesn't have a lot on the line is the Cleveland Browns, and they look kind of salty at times.
Yeah,
so,
and they got their new quarterback, right? So that
Yes.
the big thing that you said, by the way, Chargers are a dangerous team for the Chiefs. The Bengals are a dangerous team for the Chiefs. The wins that the Chiefs could get against those two teams and eliminate them before the playoffs even start,
right.
those are big. That is step number 1 to winning a Super Bowl, is eliminating, because the Bengals, I'm telling you right now, the Bengals this year are better than they are last year. They might not make it as far, but they're a better football team now than they were last year.
Yeah, you agree with that,
realize
right, Jeff?
the last 9 games, both these teams are 7-2. Joe Burrow is playing like an MVP. It's the least talked about thing in the league right now, but he is playing out of his mind. And it's the Bengals to me are a lot like the Titans, just a different version, a different variation of them because they throw the football, but it's like they don't go away. They don't scare easy. And that's why I'll never pick a blowout game with these two teams play, because just as the Chiefs have it circled, I guarantee you the Bengals hear all the talk about how they didn't deserve to win the AFC last year. They weren't the better team. Buffalo should have been there. Casey should have been there. I guarantee you that's on their minds.
Yeah. Listen, we hope you enjoy the podcast. We love doing it for you. If you could, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, tell your friends, retweet, resend, send it all out there. And, of course, help us support our sponsors. We've got a great one, Gann Asphalt and Concrete, proudly serving the entire metro area. You need anything with your parking lot, they have free consultations, no commissions, all in-house crews, great Kansas City company. Every project comes with a written warranty. You can find them online right now at GannAsphalt.com. Or give them a call. Tell them you heard about them on the Red Gold and Bold podcast, 816-485-3338. For those of you watching live, we're back at it tomorrow at 9 p.m. for our 2 Deep podcast where we talk about the NFL, the whole AFC playoff race, the NFC playoff race. That's coming up at 9 p.m. Central, or just download the podcast if you're getting us on the podcast. So for Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network, Eric Eager, he's from Consumer Sports. My name is Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB, saying thank you very much for joining us here on Red Gold and Bold.